and Abby, you know, after an introduction like that, the best thing you can do is sit down and shut up. It's going to go downhill from there. Yeah, and I want to just say, you know, throughout the career, and particularly in COVID, when we started working on some food security issues, I was director of the National Bison Association, but technically that was a part-time job, so I did a lot of consulting work, and so was lucky enough to connect with Roger and Flower Hill. And he's got a great team down there. It's a great organization. So before I jump into it, there's two other things that just through my career that are relevant. Is when I was with the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, I was president and executive director in the 90s, we organized the RMFU Cooperative Development Center, and that is still operating today and is a great resource. What I'm going to talk about tonight is cooperatives, and it is a great on-the-ground resource for cooperative development. My wife and I also helped found and ran the Broomfield Farmers Market, which we just stepped away from this year after 14 years of doing it. It was all volunteer operated for 14 years, but learned a lot about farmers market during that period. So Abby asked me to really focus on the whole areas of cooperatives. And I always like to say cooperation in cooperatives, because as Chris Roper, who is essentially my partner at Flowery Hill in the work that we do, what he likes to say is the first step in organizing a cooperative is get people to cooperate. And sometimes that's more difficult than it seems. People will say, well, gosh, we've got this problem, so let's organize a co-op and we'll be able to sell all of our products. And there's a lot of things that go into that. So first of all, and Roger gave this a little bit, but I want to give you sort of what I call the word from the sponsor here, which is the work that we're doing right now in the meat and poultry processing. Was that in 2022, USDA committed $1 billion to try and create a more resilient, diverse, and equitable meat and poultry processing system. We saw what happened during COVID. I always like to say, we've been told for years that the most efficient and resilient food processing system is to allow the consolidation of these companies into a few large processors. That was going to be the best. Well, I'm a big fan of the Wizard of Oz, and I like to say COVID came along like Toto in the Wizard of Oz and ripped back the curtain to show really how fragile that system is. And so we're working right now to create businesses to establish, expand, and really with an emphasis to reach out to underserved producers and communities. So the network that they brought together is really a great network. It's Oregon State University, the American Association of Meat Processors, the Intertribal Ag Council, American Meat Science, Agricultural Utilization Research. And these groups each have some real expertise that can help folks all the way along the process. I'll skip over this because Roger just covered it. But Flower Hill is a small but mighty team. Roger leads the ship. Chris and I are one sort of the boots on the ground. We're traveling and visiting with folks, but Nicole Mast runs the back office and keeps everything straight. Shelby White is down in Oklahoma. She does our intake. Anybody that files a request for the technical assistance goes through her. But the other thing that we did when we started was, in order to reach out to these underserved communities was we aggressively started developing a series of partnerships through memorandums of understanding. And you'll recognize some of these organizations. I saw somebody walk in with their Farmers Outreach Solutions notebook, but with Darrell Tenney and his group. But everybody from the Rodale Institute working on organic, Rivera Coalition, I think a lot of folks are familiar with them. Latino Farmers and Ranchers, Farmers Veterans Coalition, and the like. And so what we're working on was really fourfold. When we started off, there were so many of these grants hitting the ground. There was MPERG, MPEP, MCAP. And so we were probably spending 80% of our time helping people navigate the grant process. We couldn't write the grant, we couldn't do your feasibility study, but it's, are you eligible for a grant? We coach you through the process of here's what they're going to be looking for in scoring that. And we're still doing that. Right now there's 2 grants that some of the folks here may be interested in. There's the Local Food Promotion Program and the Farmers Market Promotion Program. Second one is misnamed. It's not just for farmers markets, but it's for anybody that does direct to consumer. And those grants, you can't use it for construction or for equipment, but you can use it for just about anything else. For operating capital, for designing your packaging, for consultants, for labor, all of those. So we're here to help you through that process. But the other 3 areas are the meat and poultry processing technical assistance. Roger gives me way too much credit about walking into a plant and being able to assess it. Chris Roper, who I work with, he is a construction guy. And he literally built the first tribally owned meat processing plant in the US in 2016. And he's built several others since. So he knows construction backward and forward. We help you with your business development, your business plans, your marketing plans, and then supply chain. I spend a ton of time working with folks because if you're in the meat processing and marketing business, not too hard to sell tenderloin strips and ribeyes and ground vermin. Gets a little harder to sell some of the roast and some of the onions. Gets real hard to sell things like kidneys and tripe and bones and the like. And so we're working with folks to make sure that we're utilizing the whole animal. But one of the things that came out, there was a study done a couple of years ago by a professor at the University of Illinois, and she looked specifically at meat processors, smaller meat processors. What's the survivability of smaller meat processors? But I think that this quote applies to just about anything. It says, for smaller plants, diversification is most strongly and consistently associated with plant survival. What are you doing different? And I think any of us, whether we're producing beef or goats or apples, whatever, is what are we doing different than the commodity market? And if you think about this, I tell folks that if you're putting together a meat processing enterprise, and your goal is to produce a 1-pound brick of ground beef to go sit in Smith's or Walmart next to their 1-pound brick of ground beef, guess who's going to win? You're going to lose that battle every time. And so fortunately, there are so many other opportunities for folks to connect with consumers. Everything from humane animal welfare to halal to regenerative to USDA organic, which I still hold up as the gold standard. But the issue to me and to all of us, I think, at Flower Hill, and probably to everybody here in the room, is what is the future for the independent producer? When we're seeing the consolidation and everything that's going on, not just in processing, but at the farm level, what is the future for the independent producer? And it really comes down to breaking the paradigm. And what I mean by that is we're up against the industrial paradigm. Now, when my wife and I got married in 1977, and I think a few folks here may remember the grocery stores at that time. The big thing in the grocery stores was generic food. Remember generic food? You'd have the box that would say cornflakes, or the can that would say green beans. My favorite was the 6-pack that said beer. I bought one 6-pack. It was awful. It was horrible. But the idea was nobody really cared where the food came from. They just wanted it cheap and convenient. And that's what the industrial paradigm is all about, is producing stuff at the lowest cost. Well, when you do that, then you're trying to minimize the raw commodity price, which as a farmer, that's not good news. You're producing the labor, which is not good for workers. You're actually probably taking some shortcuts on quality and food safety. So, what I like to talk about is the cooperative paradigm, where we emphasize quality. We emphasize what's good for the farmer and what's good for the consumer. We try and create products with a difference. And the great thing is the consumers are coming along with us on that. You don't see generic food in the grocery store anymore. There's a major report that comes out once a year that's called The Power of Meat. And it's funded by the Food Marketing Institute and the National Meat Institute. And it is probably the deepest dive into what's happening in the marketplace this year. Well, they just released the report in March. And I'm sorry, some of this is sort of eye chart here. But consumers are looking for these values. They want to buy products with claims such as no antibiotics, no hormones. They want it to be pasture-raised, certified. They want animal welfare. When you take a look at the priorities, what are drivers, raised in the USA, humanely raised, locally raised. So the opportunity to tell the story of what we're doing is really, really important. And that's where cooperatives have an edge. The most successful organic co-op in the country, and I would dare to say one of the most successful cooperatives is Organic Valley. Everybody familiar with Organic Valley? They're a $1.3 billion co-op. They were started by a group of farmers in southwestern Wisconsin coming out of the farm crisis in the 80s. A group of about 7 farmers called themselves the Coulee Region Organic Producers Pool. And they steadily built that co-op through a set of shared values and being able to tell their story. Even a few years ago, every year I go to an event called Natural Products Expo. It's a huge event, 80,000 people come to this thing. And anymore with what's happened in the natural and organic industry, one guy described it as a lot of big companies trying to look like little companies. You've got grass-run farms, which when you go kind of look back, it's all grass-fed, it's all this, but it's also JBS. Organic Valley, throughout the whole trade show, they just had their screen up there, and they were doing interviews, on-the-farm interviews with their farmers. They would cut from one farm to another, and he'd be out there in his field talking about his cows and what he does. It was really powerful. So, the thing about cooperatives is they're a work in progress. And I'm going to speak mainly from the standpoint of marketing cooperatives. There are a lot of different types of cooperatives. Credit unions are a cooperative. Feed stores could be a cooperative. But where I have really focused on is the marketing cooperatives. So you really have in cooperatives, you have the principles of democracy, building leadership. There is no rigid model. It has to be very flexible. And then there's this, what they call new generation cooperatives that have come about really in the last 25 years that are really important. And I want to talk about that for a minute because your traditional cooperative, and again, we're talking about on the marketing side, is, yeah, you have low equity investment requirements, you have low returns, you have open membership, and you really have no marketing. You have no commitments that are required for marketing. Well, early on in my career with Farmers Union, I was involved with a group of folks that were organizing a hay co-op up in Oregon. And they organized it as an open co-op. And the idea was, we're having trouble selling all of our hay, so let's organize this co-op to help us market it. Well, they didn't have any requirement for the quality or the amount of hay that came through that co-op. So the members would go out and they'd sell all of their hay they could private treaty to get the best price, and then whatever was left over went to the co-op. Guess how long it took that co-op to get a reputation of having the worst hay you could buy. So the idea with the new generation cooperative is you do have relatively high investment requirement, you have higher returns, you have close membership, and you have enforceable marketing commitments. And let me just use as an example. We organized a group of wheat farmers in 1994 to buy a bakery in Longmont, Colorado. And they bought it, operated it for about 12 years before they sold it. But to get into the co-op, you had to buy a share. And each share was X thousands of dollars. And each share then also carried with it the right and the obligation to deliver 900 bushels of wheat to the bakery every year of a certain quality. And that way the bakery knew that it was going to have a good supply of inputs coming in to do that. We've seen that now with some cooperatives. Chris and I are involved in a co-op up in Montana, Glacier Co-op, and it's a group of ranchers who got together. Their meat processing plant was going to close. The people were old, they just wanted to get out, and they were going to lose the processing there. So the group of ranchers got together, they sold shares, I think it was $5,000 per share. Each share then you were delivered so many animals a year to that co-op. And now they know that they will have this supply of animals to be able to market. Now the thing about the closed co-op is that on the open co-op, everybody gets dividends equal. No matter if it's your feed store, doesn't matter if you bought a whole bunch of feed or if you only bought 2 bags last year. If the feed store makes money, you get a dividend of X amount. On the closed co-op, you get dividends based on the profit, on your ownership. So the person that has 10 shares gets more money than the person that has 1 share. But on the flip side, you still have the democratic ownership in that it's 1 member, 1 vote. So every member, that member that has 1 share, has just as much say in the co-op as the member that has 10 shares. So it's a little bit of a hybrid model. So, and then there are hybrids out there. We see co-ops that are engaging in joint ventures with other co-ops, or that they will have something where they'll have a joint venture just to develop one certain product and market it. So they'll partner with that. Or they'll partner, I see that you'll have a meat processing co-op that will partner with a cattle finishing cooperative, those type of things. So, it can be done in a number of different ways. But again, the pitfalls of a co-op is trying to do the same. If you're just getting in there to do that 1 pound brick of ground beef, or that loaf of Wonder Bread, you know, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So the limited resources of producers are also a pitfall. You know, I'm mentioning things like $5,000 a share to get in there. How many of you can, you know, write a check for that tonight? Probably not many, you know. So again, what the bakery did was they worked with Farm Credit to put together a program that you could borrow your money to buy your equity shares, and they kind of did it. We want to make it as easy for people to invest in this co-op as it is to buy just a piece of farm equipment, you know, there. So there's ways that we can get around that. But the keys to success are A, vision. You got to have that shared vision. What do we all want to accomplish together? You have to have commitment. I found early on that, yeah, you know, there was a group of, they were primarily dairy farmers in Pennsylvania, but most of the timberland in Pennsylvania is on private ground. And these guys, if they needed some money, they just go cut down a couple of oak trees and call in a broker and, you know, sell it. And so they wanted to organize a timber co-op. Well, I went back and forth to Pennsylvania for about 8 months, and I realized that as long as I was there doing it, the work was getting done. But when I left, it wasn't, because they just didn't have the leadership or the commitment to do that. Capital, communication, patience, and it's all about understanding the marketplace. What are we trying to deliver to that customer? So, it requires motivated people. Every cooperative that I've seen, really any business, be it an LLC or otherwise, requires a champion. We were talking early on about Mel Coleman Sr., you know, and what he did to champion the whole natural beef thing and the battle scars that he got for it. But anything like that, it requires somebody that's willing to say, yes, I want to be a champion. It doesn't have to be one individual. Whose agenda are we pursuing? Is it a shared agenda? Over the last couple of years, I've been down in Mississippi, and there's a group of folks there that want to put together a processing and marketing co-op, and the leader of it is, you know, we're going to do all of this stuff on pasture, we're going to do pasture raised, and it hasn't moved because he wants everybody to do the pasture raised like he does his pasture raised, and it's not really, you know, reaching out to the other. So you got to have those shared values, and as I said at the outset, you got to be willing to cooperate. So to start the process, really it involves putting together a steering committee. At this point, there's really no financial commitment. This is just a group of folks. Let's talk about what we want to do. What can we put together? And then to do an initial assessment, and this is where a feasibility study can be critical. And people say, I hear feasibility studies, I hear business plans, what's the difference? The main difference is that a feasibility study is put together by a third party disinterested. Somebody who can come in and has the expertise to do the 30,000-foot view and give you an idea of where are all the pitfalls and the opportunities. A business analysis, a business plan, you know, if you're acquiring an existing business, they've got established financials, you've got something to work with. A business plan you can write yourself, a feasibility plan someone else has to do. You have to develop group ownership, and then I say chunk the process. You know, it's the old how do you eat an elephant type thing. You don't tackle it all at once. You develop a Gantt chart of a process of what you do. And you talk about what is our exit strategy. You know, as we develop, as we grow, do we want to have this continue and have a way for older members to cash out and to leave the co-op? Do we want to sell it at some point? Those are decisions that you really ought to talk about at the beginning. then strategic planning. Establish a goal, you test, you monitor, you have outcome planning. And this is where doing a SWOT analysis. I think most people are familiar with that. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Your strengths and weaknesses are your internal. What do we have? We're a dedicated group of producers. We have these animals. We have this existing facilities, whatever. Your weakness, we don't have any cash. Your opportunities, we see that there's a real need in the marketplace. I'm working with a group of producers who wants to do some land marketing, and they're looking at going into this chain, and they said, the problem is this regional grocery store that we want to sell into doesn't carry any land. They said, great, that's good news. If you're going in there and selling beef and they got 3 different beef programs in there, guess what? You got to try and elbow your way in. If you're bringing land to them, you're bringing them something they don't have. And then threats. What could happen? A pandemic, tariffs, African swine fever, you name it. Things that are outside, so you have to assess that. And then you have to say, okay, where is our profit pressure points? So our producers want to get paid when they deliver the product. Those farmers that delivered the 900 bushels a week didn't sell it. Didn't give it to the co-op. So they were going to get their money at that point. You're going to get a dividend if the co-op is profitable, and the stock is going to appreciate. Again, if you have that stock, you're an investor, the co-op grows, you can sell that stock. And of course, all of that has to come from income from the marketplace. What you sell that finished product for. So, when you do the feasibility study, some of those can be kind of expensive. But that's where some of the grant programs, particularly the Farmers Market Promotion Program, has money in there up to $75,000. There is a 25% match requirement, but that can be used strictly to fund a feasibility study. So there are those resources out there. There are also small business development centers. There are regional food business centers that were set up over the last couple of years. And Colorado's in the Rocky Mountain Center. Roger, I'm trying to think what New Mexico's in. It's in the Southwest region. But they put out business builder grants periodically that can be used for that. So you need to have that professional analysis and then do your local due diligence. And from a feasibility study, then you develop your business plan. Now, this is where I talk about the weakness of Excel. If you're putting together a pro forma and you're using Excel, you put it all together and you get down to the bottom line and there's parentheses in year 3, well, I'll just change the assumptions. I'm going to sell my product at a higher price. I'm going to process more animals. Oh, look, the parentheses disappeared, right? So you got to make sure that you're approaching it based on reality. You've got to budget for the best management. You need to take a look at having good professionals. We struggle with this in the meat processing side, is that you need to have good labor inside of a meat processing plant, but you need to have somebody that knows how to run a meat processing business. And they don't come cheap, so you need to budget for that. Your accounting procedures, and then I would say budget for the hidden bumper factor. There's going to be something coming up. Years ago, we started a co-op up in the San Luis Valley. It was undercapitalized. There was a number of things. They did raise as much equity as they wanted, but they decided to start anyway. And it limped along and everything, but what really killed them was they had an old plant that maybe processed 10 animals a week. And Rancher's Choice, yep. And all of a sudden they started processing 10 animals a day. putting them into these coolers that had these old compressors. Didn't work. Didn't work. It didn't last at all. It was one of the most tragic cooperative experiences. It is the most tragic cooperative experience because it had so much potential, but it was just, again, they didn't account for good management, they didn't raise enough money, the hidden lumber factor came and took them down. Management. This is where I say no cousin Fred. Yeah, you know, my cousin Fred, he worked in a meat plant once, so he could come in and run this one. You know, again, you need to have the right person running it. That was another problem with Ranger's Choice, was the manager that came in did not have the experience to run that. So you look to the industry, you look for that expertise that's going to be able to come in and help you. And you negotiate not just a contract, but a relationship. Management, workers have got to be part of the team. They've got to be a part of the cooperative. And I've seen cooperative structures so that the workers can buy in as certain non-voting shares or non-delivery shares or ways to do that, so that everybody has that sense of ownership. Your producer board has got to maintain oversight. A lot of the problems with cooperatives is farmers and ranchers want to organize a co-op, but what they really want to do is farm and ranch. You know? And so once they get it organized, they kind of say, okay, now I'm going to go back and take care of my cow herd. Well, you got to have that oversight and that accountability. And then the capitalization is you've got to announce the target at the outset. You've got to say, this is what we've got to raise. And that really needs to be non-negotiable. You need to develop patient capital resources. They're hard to find, but they're out there. We work a lot, for example, with a group called Steward Lending. And they are almost, for lack of a better term, a crowdsourcing lender. But they focus on the regenerative, socially responsible. And they're patient. They know that when you're developing, not just meat processing, but anything in agriculture, margins are thin. You're not going to grow something. And I always tell people, avoid the venture capitalists, those type of folks. I went to a group several years ago. This was up in Boulder, sort of the hotbed of the natural and organic industry, so there were a lot of startup companies. And they had what they called a pitch slam there, where these entrepreneurs, these startups can come in and they can present their business plan to these venture capitalists that would then perhaps invest. And the first couple that came in, they talked about, yes, I founded this company because I want long-term sustainability. I want to take care of the environment. I want to be responsible. I want to do this. And then I got to the questions, and the VC said, and what's your 3-year exit strategy? Oh, well, I'm going to build it to $30 million in sales and sell it for 3x. Well, if you're looking for long-term sustainability and environmental, and you sell something for $100 million in year 3, do you care what happens in year 4? No, we're looking for a different model of investor for those things. You can get outside investment, make sure that it's mission related, and then don't budge from that business plan. Training and education, ongoing. Ongoing. You have to continually upgrade, take a look at what's new, what's happening in the marketplace, what are new developments in food safety, in processing, in packaging, in raising our animals. You know, we're dealing a lot right now with USDA introduced what they call the remote grading system, which is great because smaller meat processors traditionally haven't been able to use meat graders because they're too expensive. You're paying for them to travel to your plant, to be at your plant, to travel back. Now with this remote grading, you can take a picture, you can send it, they can do it for a fraction. And the meat processors that I talk to that are using it say, what I really love is I can talk to my suppliers and say, this load of cattle you brought me last week rated 85% choice. This load that you brought me a month ago rated 50% choice. What are you doing with your genetics? What are you doing with your feed ration? So we got to constantly educate and upgrade. Research and development. It's really an Achilles heel. You get something, you're doing it, you think you're doing it okay, all of a sudden somebody comes out and does something new, better, whatever. You actually have to be saying, what can we do better as we grow? And that's where trying to get a revolving fund to help with that. Critical transition. You have your steering committee, you have your organizational board, but then a lot of the good people that organize a business are not the best people to run it long term. And so take a look as you go through the transition in your board of what's the type of talent we need to have on the board and have good job descriptions. And then communication. The worst thing you can do, the worst thing a co-op can do, is if you get a bump in the road and you're having a bad quarter or a bad year, is hide it from the members. You know, get out there with the members, be honest with them, let them know exactly what is happening with your cooperative. And then it all kind of, goes into a timeline. I mentioned a Gantt chart, but you can develop this when you chunk the process and you have certain areas that you say, we are going to make a go, no-go decision here. You know, we're going to have the steering committee, we're going to do this, we're going to go out and do some initial meetings. And if we get back and we find that there isn't the producer enthusiasm, that's a no-go. You know, we're going to develop our capitalization. We're going to have our equity drive. We need to raise X amount. We don't raise that amount, it's a no-go. So you take a look at that. And again, we're here to help. Our area is meat and poultry processing, but as Roger will tell you, our team looks way beyond that. If you're doing something to create more food security for your community and to help individual producers, we'll figure out a way to work with you. I also mentioned that Farmers Union's got a great co-op development center. There's some other resources out there. But to get a hold of us, if you're interested on the meat processing side, you can go to that QR code and that'll take you to the homepage there where you can go and fill out a form. It takes you 5 minutes to fill it out, who you are, where you are, what do you want to do, what kind of help are you looking for. That will get you into our database, and you get a newsletter, you get information on grants. We do, at least once a month, we do an online roundtable. We don't call them webinars because we tell people to leave your PowerPoint at home. You know, after sitting through this, you can say, okay, I'm done with PowerPoint for the night. Yesterday, we had one with two folks that are direct marketers. One is a bison up in Wisconsin, and the other one's a beef down in Mississippi, and they've built up successful direct marketing, online marketing programs. So anyway, we'll let you know about that. When it comes in, when these requests come in, we get back to you within 24 hours. Most of the time it's to say, we need more information. Let us know a little bit more about what you're working on. But we will then try and get you out to the right resource provider, or we'll set up a Zoom or a phone call, or we'll do a site visit. So, it is not a one and done. We started in March of 2022. Our agreement with USDA goes through December of 2026. We had a little bit of an interruption. Our funding was frozen from January 19th until about 10 days ago, but we're back in business. And we operated all the way. I mean, again, the Flowery Hill team, we just said, we're going to keep working because we know that this is an important program. So feel free to reach out to myself, to Chris, to Roger, any of us. We answer our phones at night, we answer it on the weekends. We're here to work with you. So I hope that kind of covered what you were looking for. Any questions or feedback? None?
I have a question. What conditions would you say would be more advantageous for someone to be pursuing like an LLC versus a co-op?
So an LLC, a lot of folks are doing LLCs because they're much easier to organize. But with a cooperative, there are more resources available. A lot of the grants that are out there, co-ops are eligible for the grants, whereas LLCs are not. Also, your one member, one vote thing is really protected under your cooperative statute. But no, that's one of the things when we work with a group and they want to organize and they're talking about a co-op, we try to go through and say, okay, let's take a look at an LLC versus a co-op and see what works better for you. Yeah?
So the difference between a cooperative and an association.
Cooperative is legally organized under cooperative law. There are distinct laws that cover cooperatives. And so once you are organized as a cooperative business entity, then you fall under its accounting procedures and all of those. Associations could be, I worked for the National Bison Association, and it was a 501c5 association, but it wasn't in a marketing or property business. So.
Both of them can own equipment.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Can you establish a nonprofit under an LLC umbrella?
Yes, you can. You can establish a nonprofit under a co-op umbrella. And you can do that. They are distinct, different entities, but you can organize them so that your board, your bylaws of the nonprofit talk about the directors or the trustees will be elected by the members of the co-op or the members of the association. And so you have that interlock.
Can you do one and the same?
They can be one and the same. Yep. We organized the Farmers Union Foundation, Rocky Mountain Farmers Union Foundation. One is their board of directors of Rocky Mountain Farmers Union are the trustees of the foundation, so they're interlocked. But they have different bylaws, they have to keep their books separate, those type of things. Yep. Other questions? All right, well, appreciate the chance to be with you, and again, feel free to reach out to us for help at any time, okay?
All right, thanks so much, Dave. That was amazing. I learned a lot from that. Is there any chance that we could get the slides to share with the mentorship program after?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, that would be
I'll leave that a
awesome.
little bit.
Yeah,
I
great.
may clean up a few typos.
We'll go easy on you. Yeah, thanks again, Dave. Next up we have George Whitten and Julie Sullivan. And I found a bio for you online, George. Would you like me to read it, or would you rather introduce yourself?
Whatever, yeah.
He did email our bios to you.
Oh, really? Okay, let me see if I can pull it up in 5 seconds. Okay, unfortunately I can't open Word on my computer. But I would love if you gave yourself a short introduction, or maybe Julie would like to introduce George. I don't know if that's awesome. You don't have to.
He can introduce himself. I will do that.
So, Julie's gonna come up here, we might put some chairs here and we'll sit down and that's it, might back and forth in a minute, but I like to wander around. My name is George Whitten, and I have been in this business of livestock production from the beginning. My grandfather started a sheep operation in the north end of San Jose Valley, 1890s, and so we built on that over all these generations. And one of the things that I think about when all of the things that I've done in my life and got to this place is we started with following sheep into the mountains. Thousands of ewes going into the high country every summer. So when you're out there, you have to solve problems day to day with things that are at hand. Nobody's going to come and help you. There's not any, you can't go back to town and buy something. You have to deal with the issues every day. And you have to be prepared in certain ways, but you also have to be very versatile and very resilient and be able to find your way. And so from that very beginning, since then I have done a lot of things, but I've been an organic farmer. I was certified organic for many years. Before I was with Mel Coleman originally, Coleman Natural Beef, and we sold cattle through them. We never liked taking our animals to the sale barns, and we didn't like dealing with the commodity market, so we're always trying to find another way. There was no other real market in those days except selling to all the lambs in the wool went to Denver, the calves went, there wasn't any of these alternative markets other than maybe selling an animal to your neighbor or something. But so we started with Coleman Natural Beef, and we sold cattle through them. I did not like the feedlot system, and we were certified organic, and so about that time, Coleman got involved with the Japanese, and they wanted to raise something like Kobe beef, so they wanted to leave our calves in those feedlots for like twice as long as you would normally feed a calf. Well, being organic, if you doctored them, then they fell out. And so a lot of them started getting sick because they're too fat and not in good, it just didn't work. And so we quit with Coleman's and went with the commodity market for a while, and then after that we started actually right here in Taos, and what I need to be talking about is Sweetgrass Co-op, because I can get off on a lot of different tangents. But right here in Taos, I was doing some consulting work here, and we were selling some grass-fed beef, and we were selling animals to a producer who was doing really well in the Santa Fe farmers market. We had some really fine Angus-based cattle that were well marbled, and he really liked them, and so we started selling to him, and long story short, it got to where he started owing me more and more money, and he couldn't pay me. And so the agreement was that I would take those cattle. Well, I didn't have any place to market them. And about that time, La Montanita Food Co-op, it's in Santa Fe, Albuquerque, the stores, La Montanita, SIDS is not part of La Montanita, but they needed a new supplier for their grass-fed beef program. And we were already certified organic, and we had these animals, and I couldn't sell, so we sat down right here in a shop here in town with them and made a deal with La Monta Food Co-op, and that's been 13, 14 years.
March 2010
Yeah.
is when I formed the co-op.
And that's 9 to 10 animals every 2 weeks. It's a fresh meat market, so that means that year round you're having to sell big animals to them. And they have to meet a certain quality. All these animals have to be ultrasounded, they have to be a carcass weighted a certain level, and they need, there's some real criteria around that. So I went out and found some other producers. That little bunch of cattle that I had got saddled with was my first sale, salvaged that. But after that, we found some other producers, and I formed a co-op called Sweetgrass Co-op. And at that time, there were 9 or 10 original members, I think. And most of them are still in the co-op, some aren't. But as Dave was talking about, you have to have a basic fundamental belief in what you're trying to do. One of the reasons Organic Valley is a really successful co-op is because a lot of them are Mennonites. And they have that cultural, that background that makes them want to be cooperative. One of the things with our co-op we struggle with is cattle prices get higher and higher. People say, well, hell, I can take this calf to town and get more money than I'm going to get by the time I finish it. So you have to have commitment Because we promised La Montanita, we're gonna deliver a certain number of animals for a certain price, and every year or 6 months now, we have to renegotiate that price. But in the meantime, you kind of have to eat some of that, what could be profit because of the increasing price of live cattle. Almost daily now, they're still going up. And I don't know when that's gonna stop. It's an interesting thing. But anyway, it's really about cooperation. That's why they call it a co-op. And you have to have people who are committed and they have a fundamental belief in what it is you're trying to do. They need to really believe in raising the animals the way that you advertise that you raise them. You do not want to be found out to be a charlatan or tell a lie, because that will kill your business. I've seen a lot of grass-fed or a lot of organic producers all over the country who are not honest, and that'll kill your business. That goes way faster than all the work you can do trying to promote and show stories and tell. But if you have somebody not being honest in your co-op, then that's going to kill your business. So you have to really pay attention to that level. So I'm going to let Julie talk a little bit about some of the other, these attributes that it takes to require or to carry on a co-op, and I'll shut up.
So is this working? No?
Push it all the way up to the top.
Here you
Maybe use it.
I'll just use this.
I'll take the
Okay,
one.
you can hear me now? Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about is actually prior to La Montanita asking George and I to help them sort of figure out how they were going to have a supplier. Years before that, actually in 2003, George and I had decided that we wanted to stop selling into the sale barn and sell direct to the consumer. Part of that was I'd been a vegetarian for 25 years, fell in love with a cattle rancher. We needed to figure out some way to create an alternative. And so we were deeply motivated at that moment to try to find an alternative that made it so that we could actually run a business jointly. And so we, at that point, then decided to not take any income for a year, retain ownership of all of our calves, and start to grass finish them. This was in 2002. So again, not much market for that yet. At the same time we were doing that, a lot of other small ranchers who we knew in southern Colorado and northern New Mexico were doing the same thing. A lot of people started feeling like they wanted to be, as they say, a price maker rather than a price taker. They wanted to feel like they had some ownership over the end product that they were raising. They wanted to have that sense of pride in what they were raising and have that direct relationship with customers who really valued what they were raising. So we found that we were going into competition with our friends, and that didn't feel good. And so rather than sort of just figure that we were going to do what worked for us, we started to talk to other friends that were all trying to do all of it. We were all trying to be cow-calf operators, run yearlings, run stockers, run finishers, and then market. Nobody is good at all of that stuff. We certainly aren't good at all of that stuff. So the idea was to, rather than be in competition with our friends, and also rather than try to be all things and fail at most of them, by working collaboratively with other people, we would probably have a better chance of success, and that's exactly what happened. So even before the market presented itself, we had been talking with we didn't call it a steering committee, but we had this core group of deeply values-based producers who had a shared land ethic as well as a shared ethic around animal husbandry. And we had started those conversations years before the opportunity to create the co-op actually happened. So I think it's just important sometimes to think about, like, who do you know who already believes the same things you believe and wants to help create that alternative, because creating the alternative on your own is really difficult. So that's one thing I wanted to say. So then in March of 2010, when we decided to create Sweetgrass Co-op, we actually used the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union Co-op Development Group to help us get an RBEG grant and actually do some of our initial sort of feasibility studies, marketing plans. We already had a customer, so we sort of had the cart before the horse. But we still wanted to do sort of create a mission and vision statement for the co-op, which we read at every in-person board meeting every year in order to continue to deeply ground ourselves in our core values and make sure that we were staying true to that. The other thing we did, because we were ranchers from southern Colorado down at one point all the way down to Belen, we decided that we needed to have shared protocols about how we raised our animals, as well as we did ultrasound testing for tenderness and marbling in order to make sure that we had consistent quality across the, at times, 11 or 12 ranches that were supplying, so that as a brand, there was going to be some commonality, even though there was going to be seasonal shifts in who was producing at any point in the year. Let me see, what else did I want to say? The other thing that I think George mentioned that we found in the ebbs and flows in all of the years of the co-op is that in the years when cattle prices are low, all of a sudden everybody wants to be a member of the co-op because we have a guaranteed price, which is something you don't have. That was one of the things that really shocked me when I came into the livestock business, was you spend all year raising something and you don't know what you're going to get paid for. That's an incredibly disempowering feeling. You also can't budget if you don't know what you're going to make. So one of the things that we would talk about as co-op members was, we don't always have the highest price, we usually don't have the lowest price, but we have a guaranteed price for a year. So we can actually budget our operations appropriately, and I think that's a great benefit to it. There's a stability there that doesn't exist when you're out there just on your own. Let me see, what else did I want to say? I would say that we're a new generation co-op. I'd never heard that definition. That was really useful. We're a closed co-op. You have to apply to become a member. There is a membership fee. We don't have shares, but everybody has to guarantee a certain number of animals that are going to be sold that year. And you get your price, but then you have a patronage dividend based on how many animals you actually run through the co-op in a year. We have had co-op members leave, and we've been able to pay out their accumulated dividend when they've left. So membership has fluctuated over all of the years. George and I are the only beginning members who are still with the co-op. We happen to be married too, even though I don't have a name. Other things, at times some of our producers have been certified organic, and we were selling into Panorama, which was going into Whole Foods. Then the price tanked by 40% overnight, so we don't do business with them anymore. We're in the process as a co-op of certifying with Audubon. George and I have been an Audubon certified ranch for a number of years, but as a co-op we see the benefit, again, in telling the story about land management, about caring for place, about being deeply rooted in our region. And the Audubon certification says that to a customer. It also tells you a lot about your land health, because you have biologists come out and actually do surveys. So we really love that certification. Some of our members who were certified organic were also GAP 4 certified, because we were selling into the Whole Foods market. That's all I had to say right now. Do you have anything else you want to say, or you want to take questions?
Questions?
What is the ultrasound for?
It's, here.
The ultrasound testing?
The ultrasound testing tests, does a ribeye score, so it tests how the muscles are striated actually over the rib cage area, and that is a determination about whether the animal is genetically prone to be tender on grass. In general, 80% of the American cow herd is tender on grass, 20% is not, so regardless of breed, if you're trying to grass finish, about 20% of your herd is going to be tough as a boot. And so the ultrasound scanning, which is something we started doing in 2002, has moved it so we maybe have 2 or 3% of our herd which isn't naturally tender on grass. It also checks for intermuscular fat, so you know whether you're going to have an animal that marbles well. So it's a quality control measure for grass-fed.
Is that something you do or you contract?
We have a technician who comes out and does it every year.
We do them in about 10 months of age to a year, right in there, is when we ultrasound, and it just takes a picture of the ribeye right there. And the way that the striations of that ribeye muscle are, the angle, and the way that butchers cut meat, when you cut a loin, you cut it straight across this way. Well, if the striations of that muscle are at an angle, that's going to be a tough piece of meat. If they're straight, then it's just like a piece of wood. Think about it like a chopping wood, you know, same thing. And so we can identify those traits ahead of time and breed for that. It's genetically heritable, and some bull producers are now using those criteria in bull selection, so you can look for that. You know, but you want to be careful about selecting for one trait. Obviously, you know, these animals still have to live on our range and live on our ranch and do all the things that we ask them to do, and produce a calf every year and all of that. So you have to be careful about going too far that way. But over the years, we're down where less than 1 or 2% of our animals will fail either marbling or tenderness.
Are you aware of any other animals that get that testing for their quality of meat, like lamb or pork?
I don't think you do it for lamb, and I don't know about pork. Yeah, pork just, the way pork is raised, I don't know. Yeah.
It's a good question.
That's a
We
good
can ask our
The
technician.
grading, the only grading they do is for beef.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does all your co-op go to one processor?
Currently, most of because La Montanita is our customer in New Mexico, they use Moriarty, Western Way down there. That's the processing plant that because they own that, they buy the carcass, and we're done with it at that point. That's I should have mentioned
It's
that.
a whole carcass customer.
It's a whole carcass customer, so they buy the whole carcass, and then they have their cutting shops where they cut it up and process it however they want and distribute it to their.
When you say carcass on the hoof, is that?
No, carcass is the hot carcass
Hot
weight.
hanging weight.
So you take your animal in, it's slaughtered, they take the hide and the offal out, and then they weigh that carcass, and that's where we get paid. So everybody in the co-op gets paid for what they actually produce is hanging meat, not a live animal.
Who does the slaughter?
Western Way does the slaughter, and in that case, La Montanita contracts with them for that, and they have their own arrangement. It's mostly cut up into primals, and then they ship it to their butcher shops.
We have started to do some direct marketing through Sweetgrass Co-op, and so when we're servicing the Colorado market with the direct market, we actually have been using different processors. We go to Westcliff, which is the processor that we personally use for our direct marketing. Because George and I have our own direct marketing beef business, and then we also have Sweetgrass Co-op.
Yeah, we have 3 or 4 LLCs. And we also, the co-op is another, we have a very diverse operation. So, you know, whichever one of those kind of fits that particular aspect. We've separated our land from our livestock and our businesses. That's 2 different businesses, you know.
The other thing that I just wanted to say, since I didn't introduce myself, is that the other thing George and I did was in 2009, we created the new Agrarian Ranch Apprenticeship Program with the Kibera Coalition. So that now runs on about 20 ranches in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas. And so we're mentors in that program, and so we're also sort of helping to support the next generation through a residential ranching apprenticeship program. So those apprentices are also involved in the meat business and get involved with Sweetgrass Co-op, so they're learning the business side as well as actual production skills. So that's just, like when he's talking about multiple LLCs, that's another thing that we're doing.
What's your production, how many animals do you process a year, do you sell a year, more or less?
Well, the co-op, processes.
Your ranch.
Oh, our ranch. Right now, we are
It was
down
about 32 last year.
about 32 head, yeah, this year. It's not huge for us, the direct sales. We focused in on basically our local markets. There was a time when we were certified organic, and I was going all over the country buying organic calves and then bringing them to the San Luis Valley and finishing them for Whole Foods. We had a contract with Whole Foods to produce, and I was selling them finished animals by the truckload, 40 to 44 head every week in the fall, that then went to Brush, Colorado, where they were processed for Whole Foods, another whole carcass producer. And that worked really well for a while. And then when Amazon bought Whole Foods, they cut our contract by 40%, and we had an investment of many hundreds of thousands. But anyway.
We're in time, in fact, I think we're over time, so I didn't know if there was any other questions specific for us, but I want to make sure that there's time for your breakout rooms and everything.
Thanks, Joseph. Any lasting pressing questions? All right, well, thank you guys so much.